Breaking news. This is your World War III update. And holy SHDF, did that escalate quickly. This war in Europe is about to explode in intractable ways, and it's about to go into overdrive. We have arrived. I've been cautioning since day one of Trump's election that eventually him and Putin would reach an impasse. And to the dismay of hundreds of thousands of former MAGA subscribers to the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel, I persisted in my assertion that not only would Trump not end the war, but in fact he would be the World War III president-select. And here we are. Finally, I will not conform to your political sensitivities. I will tell you the truth even if I lose your vote of confidence on this channel, because I know if I just stick to the truth, I will be vindicated. And here we are, guys. Here we are. It's now out of the bag. The mask is off. Today, Trump has stated definitively that not only does he believe that Ukraine can take back its territory, but they might even go a little bit further. That NATO should start shooting down Russian drones and planes if they enter into NATO airspace. Well, that's a slippery slope, because soon enough that's going to involve Ukraine's airspace as well. Mark my words. And also that his relationship with Vladimir Putin, this so-called affinity that he thought he had, was but a confabulation, but theater for the cameras, and just a means to temporize until they could reach some form of resolution, which of course they never were able to reach. At the time of making this video, France is doing nuclear simulation exercises and are simulating a nuclear strike on Russia, okay? An American E-3B Century aircraft, which is a nuclear command and control plane, is partaking in this exercise. Now, if you're in Europe, and if you're in Eastern Europe in particular, number one, I can't advise millions of people to leave their homeland, nor do I expect you to, but you better have a plan. Because based on the civil defense planning that is underway in Poland, if that's any reflection of how it's going to be in your country, life is about to become immiserating. So I would strongly encourage anybody in Eastern Europe, you need to get your affairs in order ASAP, because this war is about to spill over into your borders, it appears. Now, let's talk about what Trump had to say today when asked by reporters if his sentiments with Vladimir Putin had changed or not. We're going to start with Trump in the presence of Emmanuel Macron, president of France. And again, France is currently running nuclear drills with the United States. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Okay, and just FYI, the price of gold is still approaching $3,800 an ounce. In fact, it was higher than that. I believe it was $3,820 today, if you can believe that. I now am of the persuasion that this has very little to do with the monetary system and the Fed, and it has a lot more to do with the geopolitical situation around the world. Here's what Trump had to say when interviewed by reporters in various meetings surrounding the UN National Security Council meeting that is currently being held in New York today.
Emmanuel has actually helped me with a couple of the wars. We settled 7 wars. The biggest disappointment, but I think that'll happen eventually, is the Ukraine and Russia situation. But
just to be clear, 2 of those wars were started on Trump's watch. One, they partook in and is largely still ongoing, although there has been a brief reprieve in hostilities, and the other are places that nobody can really even find on a map.
We've settled. I thought that was going to be the easiest one because of my relationship with Putin, but unfortunately that's it. Relationship didn't mean anything, unfortunately. But when I needed
that relationship didn't mean anything, unfortunately. Well, what a surprise.
Advice, and when I needed some help in terms of a country in that part of the world, you were always there, and you helped me settle some of these 7 wars.
Need a Meatloaf song playing in the background for that one. Here's what he said when in the presence of Vladimir Zelensky, I think to the surprise even of Zelensky. And just remember, not too long ago, we were in the Oval Office. And what this really indicates is that Trump is such a weather vane politician that you can't take what he's saying to the bank one way or the other. I mean, he could do a complete 180 tomorrow, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is actually what he's truly wanted to say the whole time, but has been reticent about. But here we go.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that NATO should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter NATO airspace? And he says, yes, I do. Radoslaw Sikorski says, roger that. That's the Polish Prime Minister. Let's continue.
Mr. President, any update on your talks with President Putin, and do you still trust him?
I'll let you know in about a month from now, okay?
Do you still trust Vladimir Putin? I'll let you know in about a month. Now, there's so much happening, in a month. For all we know, Ukraine is planning more attacks using these bunker-busting cruise missiles that they claim to have invented and claim to be domestically producing. But interestingly, this is a map that is circulating, and this is what Trump had to say. Ukraine would be able to take back their country in its original form and, who knows, maybe even go further than that. So people, as you can see, are drawing a new map of Ukraine with surrounding oblasts. Now, this might be fantastical thinking. That's fine. Regardless, there's a clear sea change in terms of the White House and the Pentagon's approach to this conflict, and that they are now fully backing Ukraine to try to take back all of their territory. Here's what Trump said on Truth Social. After getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it is causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form, with time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular, NATO, of course, which the US is involved in, so thereby adding the United States to the list of benefactors. The original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not, he says. Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have taken a real military power less than a week to win. Touché. This is not distinguishing Russia. In fact, it's very much making them look like a paper tiger. When the people living in Moscow and all the great cities, towns, and districts throughout Russia find out what is really going on with this war, the fact that it's almost impossible for them to get gasoline through the long lines that are being formed, and all of the other things that are taking place in their war economy, where most of the money is being spent on fighting you. God, this is a run-on sentence. Use some frickin' periods, POTUS! Which is great spirit and only getting better. Ukraine would be able to take back their country in its original form, and who knows, maybe even go further than that. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and this is the time for Ukraine to act. This is a green light. Ukraine's already been acting. They just bombed Moscow airport yesterday, and you had all those flights circulating overhead because they had no place to land. This is a serious escalation. Eventually, Russia has to push back. Right now, they're still doing this performative diplomacy thing, but I think that's about to run out. I think eventually we are going to see the same sort of disdain and hostility that we've seen towards Biden, towards Donald Trump. And that's when things are going to get interesting or downright terrifying. Putin and Russia are in big economic trouble, and it's time for Ukraine to act. In any event, I wish both countries well. What? We will continue to supply weapons to NATO and NATO to do what they want with them. Good luck to all. President of the United States of America. At the time of making this video, it's been observed by OSINT aggregators that only 4 Russian nuclear submarines are currently in port. In fact, Russian nuclear submarines, as many of you probably know by now because you've heard myself and guests talk about this, they can actually fire their nuclear weapons and hit their targets from port. So just because they're docked doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to use their nuclear weapons in an efficient manner. In fact, this almost guarantees that the message can get through because there's a hard line communication into the submarine. Now, there's debate as to whether or not that's in the strategic calculus. Regardless, the most amount of submarines are out and about has been observed since the beginning of the war. Okay, so that's another significant data point. There's also a French nuclear exercise that is confirmed to be underway at the time of making this video. There is a simulation that is combining, I believe they're using a E-6B Mercury airborne command and control plane from the United States to help facilitate that exercise. So these are all the planes that are actively involved. So at the time, and you know, just consider the circumstances here. And this is why I really need people to watch every video I do, just so you're fully apprised of all the precipitating events, because there's been so much stuff that has been happening. So to have the French doing a exercise where they're simulating nuclear strikes against Russia with the participation of one of the most important command and control nuclear airplanes in the US arsenal, that is really significant, especially on a day where Trump is making these very pivotal statements, okay? So at the time of making this video, they're running nuclear exercises where they're simulating doing decapitation strikes on Moscow. I told you it was all going to go to shit after that Alaska summit, and here we are. Concurrently, you have Germany conducting exercises to transfer military forces to the eastern border of NATO. This will take place under the code Red Storm Bravo. Red Storm Bravo, really? So they're really, you know, treating this as if, you know, the red communist menace. So we're going to see a resurgence in all of that stuff. You know, they're going to make MAGA Russophobic. They're going to bring back the McCarthyist rhetoric and all that stuff. It's all going to get a return. Mark my words. Just watch. If you don't think that they can turn MAGA against Russia, you've been not paying attention to human psychology. The exercises will be held from the 25th to the 27th. About 500 soldiers of the German army. Consider that just a couple days ago, the UK, just yesterday in fact, they did an unannounced test of a Trident nuclear missile, nuclear-capable missile. I believe it was pointed at the southern Atlantic. Regardless, that this is an unannounced test. Well, you have Germany talking about building bunkers. You know, you got all these intermarrying countries handing out, you know, how to prepare for war emergency booklets, encouraging stockpiling, EU doing, you know, EU-wide stockpiling. I mean, clearly the writing is on the wall at this point. You need to be preparing for war. If I'm in Europe, and look, I'm preparing in the maniacal fashion that I am, and I don't even live in Europe. So if you're in Europe and you're not, you know, investing a significant portion of your being into the pursuit of having a plan of action for when war breaks out, then I don't get, maybe it's Darwin, maybe it's a part ingrained in European culture that when you got to go to war, you got to go to war, and that's it, and you just do what the government tells you. I don't know, out here we have more of an individualist mindset, I guess, which is not to say that all my European viewers, of which I know there are many, and I just want to remind people that even though our 25% off CanadianPreparedness.com sale cannot be shipped to the United States for reasons that I'm not going to get into again. I wish I could, I just can't, because Trump made it really difficult. There's no mechanism through which we can do it in a way which is efficient and cost effective. I will say we still can extend that offer to our European customers. So capitalize on it while you can, because quite frankly, the way things are progressing with these drone incursions and all this rhetoric, and Trump just gave them the green light to shoot down Russian planes, guys. That's what that was. Now, we could say Trump is a weather vane politician who waffles and is ambiguous and all this stuff, but I think today is different. That statement that he made, that's not something you can retract. That is as clear as day. That is a green light to go all the way. And that's exactly what they're going to try to do. Now they think there's blood in the water. They're going to go for it, because from Europe's point of view, they're the only ones who stand to gain anything out of this. So they're going to actually go and try to defeat the Russians. And they think that's not going to end in a mushroom cloud. I would expect that Orezhnik test any minute now. Now, in terms of what's going on in Norway, apparently there was some more bombs today that went off. There was some grenades that went off. Now, this is getting really suspicious. Is this a false flag theater? I don't know. It's hard to say. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because it's one of those things where it's, for at least for the time being, it's a victimless crime. There's a couple grenades that apparently went off. People got sent out emergency messages on their phones. This is perhaps foreshadowing. And this, of course, on the heels of what happened yesterday. Now, they claim that those drones that were interfering with flight operations in, was it Oslo or was it Copenhagen? I think it was Copenhagen, actually, in Denmark. Anyways, one of those places. There's been so many cross-border incursions, Estonia, Poland. I think it was in Norway, actually, in Oslo. So there's been 3 ships that have been implicated in this, and they all have Russian ties, allegedly. Now, there was a Singaporean couple who I think was arrested for flying a hobbyist drone, but I think that was unrelated to the other drones that they were saying were much larger in size. Very similar to the New Jersey drone thing, okay? So there's 3 Russian-linked vessels, one of which is the Oslo Carrier 3, which are suspected of launching drones towards Copenhagen Airport, Danish state broadcaster TV2 reported. The sanctioned Russian cargo ship Astral 1, the tanker Pushra, which sails under the flag of Benin and has been sanctioned for transporting Russian oil, and the Norwegian cargo ship Oslo Carrier 3 was 7 kilometers from Copenhagen Airport when the drones were in the air. The ship's crew is Russian, and the owner has offices in Kaliningrad. Now, correlation doesn't equal causation, so take it with a grain of salt. Regardless, at this point in time, they still believe that the Russians blew up Nord Stream. We're never going to find answers to these things. You know, you can try to disprove it all you want, but at this point in time, these things are happening so quickly, you really just have to look at what is the messaging here. Clearly, they're trying to attribute this to Russia. And I think Zelensky has even directly stated as much. That, you know, it may not come as a surprise to people, but he, of course, said that he thought that it was the Russians who did this. So that's that. Basically, the stage is now set for the next rung up the escalation ladder, and the punctuated escalation shall ensue. So in Estonia, based on their recent incursion of MiG-31 fighter jets that they claim came very close to the capital, Tallinn, for 12 minutes. According to Pentagon Chief Hegseth, he spoke with his Estonian counterpart and affirmed that the U.S. stands with NATO allies and that any incursion into NATO airspace is unacceptable. So there we go. They're getting them lubed up on all fronts. It's about to go down. They're even calling it an attack. They're calling it an attack because it's extremely serious when you close an international airport for 4 hours. I wonder how Moscow feels about that. This is Romania today. Apparently, there was a chemical manufacturing facility or some kind of facility of that nature which had a fire or blew up. And of course, this of course would be suspected to be some sort of active sabotage, especially at this stage of the game. However, when you have the rearmament of all of these countries and the mass military mobilization, you're bound to have a lot of accidents, especially when you don't have an efficient process in order to do so. So that is what is going on abroad. Now, there's also the issue of Iran. So we have very, very big developments there today. The Ayatollah is still proclaiming that they have possession of their 60% uranium, and indeed that they can ramp it up to 90% in a matter of weeks. That concern has been echoed by International Atomic Energy Agency Director Rafael Grossi. Here's what he had to say today, and this is how you know the war in Iran is about to flare up. In fact, it's anybody's ball game at this point in time. I've had this ongoing bet with a friend of mine, and I've been telling him, look, the war in Russia and Ukraine is going to be where things flare up first. He's been persistent in saying, no, it's going to be Iran. That's going to be where World War III starts. I think it's going to be Ukraine and Russia. But now you have Venezuela coming up the backstretch, so you just never know. Here's what Grossi had to say. We resumed some inspections on Iran, but have not been granted access to the locations of the enriched uranium. Okay, well, if you believe the United States, then you believe that it's entombed in rubble beneath Fordow facility. Iran is heavily protecting its 420 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium and enriching the stockpile to 90%. So this presumes, based on Grossi's statement, that Iran was able to move the material out of Fordow facility before it was allegedly destroyed. Although, as many guests that we've had on the channel have made a compelling case that it wasn't in fact destroyed, only mildly damaged. Would only take a matter of weeks for them to get to 90% weapons-grade uranium. They still have the necessary technology for this, he claims. It is still difficult to know how much the Iranian nuclear program has been set back because we have not inspected the attacked facilities, but the program no longer exists as it was before. Now, interestingly, the Ayatollah made a big speech. Basically, same old, same old. If we're going to get nukes, we're going to get nukes. They were doing ICBM tests early in the week. They are potentially, many people in the Iranian government are calling for getting out of the non-proliferation treaty. So the writing's on the wall. Iran has to get nukes. It's like nukes or bust at this point. But Trump was in a meeting with Middle Eastern leaders today as an offshoot of the National Security Council at the UN in New York City. And he abruptly concluded the meeting with Arab and Muslim leaders in under an hour. And this is a fairly large meeting that you think would be of critical importance at this point in time. Leaders avoided press inquiries and Trump departed without commenting at all. Who knows? Maybe he just really had to go to the bathroom, or maybe it was something more ominous. Hard to say. As far as Venezuela is concerned, the latest satellite images have confirmed that the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Jason Dunham, equipped with Tomahawk cruise missiles and deployed to the Caribbean Sea on Trump's orders, is currently located just 50 kilometers off the coast of Venezuela. And it appears as though, the last I heard, and I can say this with a fairly high degree of confidence, Maduro has enacted some war measures and has endowed himself with more military powers in preparation for what they expect is going to be some kind of attack or invasion from the United States. If you guys didn't know, nuclear bunker demand is up in Germany. Mario Piede, technical director of BSSD Defense, a company that constructs bunkers across Germany, told Bild that inquiries have increased by 50% since the beginning of the year. Companies call us because they want bunkers for their employees on company premises. Now that's interesting, considering that, Trump was supposed to be the peace president. Well, Germany doesn't think so. In fact, as I talked about yesterday, they're preparing for their hospitals to meet the surge capacity of a conventional war with the Russians, to take on 1,000 wounded soldiers per day if a NATO-Russia war breaks out, presuming, I guess, that it doesn't go nuclear, because it's going to be 1 million casualties a day if that happens, likely even more. Now, in terms of what's going on domestically, I don't even really want to talk about it, to be quite honest, because we got to deal with these idiots. My goodness. This is the kind of woman, she'll get hit by a car and she'll say, you got to ban all cars. This guy wasn't even born here. He's the public service minister or public safety minister or something like that. Anyways, the gun ban is in full swing. They're rolling it out in Nova Scotia first, okay? And, her logic, I can't even remember what her name is, I don't care to, but her logic is as follows. Even though there's no empirical evidence to support the idea that taking the guns from law-abiding, thoroughly vetted, tax-paying gun owners has any correlations in reduction in gun-related crime, she somehow has convinced herself that if you ban guns and you make them restricted or prohibited, the criminals will turn those guns in. And you can tell by this face that if she thinks that, she actually thinks that, okay? This was, I think she was a survivor of a mass shooting incident, and then she became a crusader to take away everybody's guns. Look, freedom comes with a cost. What is that old saying? If you're willing to give up your liberties for safety, you deserve neither, and that's exactly what we're going to get. And that is why these asshats are doing the bidding of the elite to call the birds. Millions of dollars to call these ostriches. And you know that these guys don't want to be there doing this. You can see it in their eyes that they know that they shouldn't be doing this dumbass shit with taxpayer money. Nonetheless, it's all about control. It's all about the centralization of control. Because prepping, survivalism, anybody who seeks to do it themselves is antithetical to a system that's reliant on a increasingly more complex global supply chain. So this is why they have to get rid of anybody who has any modicum of agency or volition whatsoever, because it's a threat. It becomes a liability, especially if you know you're going into a major world war. So we can only hope that the incompetence of these people and the resistance from provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, even surprisingly, the OPP, who don't want to be, that's the Ontario Police Department, don't want to be confiscating firearms. They just want to do what they do best, and that's handing out tickets and being dicks half the time. Well, not all of them, of course, but many of the ones that work up in North Ontario, not the nicest kind of people, to be brutally honest. And I've taken my share of cross-sections with those individuals, and I can tell you, I think it must just be the bugs up there in North Ontario that drives these people mad to the point of being jaded, and everybody looks like the enemy. Nonetheless, if we have to hope at this point in time that these people are so incompetent that they didn't think this through and it's going to fail. In fact, they're starting to talk now about they're going to confiscate the SKS-2. I think they should go for it, okay? I think they should try to take it all. I think they should try to piss off as many people, and they should overplay their hand. Because if they do that, the pushback is going to cause this whole thing to fail. I think they need to bite off more than they can chew. Right now, people are wearing these rose-colored glasses and they think, look, they're not going to be able to confiscate all the guns. Look at what ICE is doing in the United States. Look at what they're doing for some birds. Look, if the government wants to do some dumb shit that's going to restrict your rights and freedoms, they damn well will. They will do it systematically, and they will waste a lot of money in the process. And there's people who are making the case that, oh, well, you're not paying us enough for our guns. Look, I did a whole video on this a year ago, and the whole gun buyback thing and the grievance with the price, I don't care if you give me $1 or $10,000 for my guns. I'm not giving up my guns. I don't want to give up my guns, okay? So in making it an issue that you're not getting fair value for the firearm, you effectively move the goalpost, because you're saying then, well, if you give me fair value for the gun, I'm happy to be fully disarmed and beholden to the state and concede what I believe to be an inalienable right, okay? Your right to self-preservation. Understand the reason why the Second Amendment is so important. If they can take away, excuse me, your right to self-preservation, they can do anything. Think about it. If they can take away something that empowers you to, of course you can't really make a case for this in Canada because there's legality surrounding it, but when you think about it from an American point of view, your right to defend yourself, to self-preserve, to make sure that you do not die because of someone else's dumbassery, well, that is an inalienable right. It's something that is just, it's something that shouldn't be a subject of debate. So if they can remove that from the equation, if they can convince you that you are a bad person for wanting to use your own discernment in order to protect yourself in a situation where violence is being brought against you, then they can convince you of really anything after that, right? So I think that there's something far more malevolent going on here. I don't think these individuals in particular are part of it. I think they're just the conduit for that malfeasance. Some agenda is being run here, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, but a lot of it just has to do with the nature of centralization of governance, the need for more and more control, and it very likely does involve some sort of long-term plan that is going to factor into how things play out geopolitically. Because why else would they want to deprive you of that right? Think about it. If you know that there is no scientific data to support the argument that if you disarm law-abiding gun owners, that there's going to be a reduction in gun crime. And they'll say things like, well, somebody can, steal your guns from your safe and all this stuff. The storage laws in Canada are incredibly strict. The actual amount of events and incidents like that are minimal, if non-existent, in most years. And so to make those arguments, these are not logical arguments. It's a non sequitur to say that if you remove the guns from law-abiding gun owners, that there's going to be less gun crime. So why are they doing it then? You really have to ask, because clearly somebody amidst these people has to have a little bit of brains. And then the only thing you can surmise is that it's something nefarious. Because why else would they be doing it if not to want to control and manipulate you more and convince you that you do not have the right. It's not even just that you don't have the right. They want you to rail against it. They want you to really genuinely believe that you're incapable of determining, whether or not something is a threat and what degree of force you should utilize in that situation. They don't believe you're competent. They only believe the government is competent enough. The government who takes 45 minutes to get there on a good day, okay? So the self-defense, in my personal opinion, is a fundamental right. Now, if you go to the RCMP and you say, hey, I want a gun for self-defense, they're probably going to say, try again, right? It has to be for target shooting or hunting or some other reason. Because again, they think we're children, okay? And for whatever reason, in one of the biggest countries, the second biggest country on earth, where there's an abundance of wild game and places to shoot, and an abundance of honest, hardworking, reliable, trustworthy shooters, why would you ever want to deprive these people of that capability? I mean, it's dumb, even if only for civil defense purposes. Why is it that in places like Switzerland, why do they encourage it there? Why do they not trust us here? That's really the big question. Why do they think we cannot be trusted? Now, a lot of these mass shooting incidents, a lot of the gang violence, a lot of the gun violence is stuff that is off the books. So you really have to wonder, what's the deal with these people? Have they just groupthink themselves into a corner? Or is there really something more malevolent? Or is it just that the government wants that monopoly of force? I don't think these people are capable of the level of malevolence that will be required for the machinations that I'm discussing here with respect to disarming the population so they're more malleable come SHTF. It's a catch-22. It's a double-edged sword because, sure, your population will be easier to manipulate, but on the same token, they'll be easier to invade because nobody will know how to fire a gun. Now, perhaps they realize that in the future, it's all going to be automation anyways, so it doesn't matter. But if you want the details of the gun buyback, here they are. So it's going to start off in Nova Scotia, a pilot program, and later on this fall, it's going to roll out everywhere. This is why I would encourage people, move to Saskatchewan and Alberta, okay? Because we have, what are they called? What do we call them here? Geez, I'm having a brain fart here. We have premiers who are doing their darndest to try to put as many hoops as possible for the federal government to jump through, including the licensing and the protocols for the assessment and destruction of firearms that are going to just be very arduous. So they're putting all of these hoops in the way that the government has to jump through to make the process more stringent, and thus, hopefully, we can forestall the inevitable. But, you know, if we can postpone it at least until there's some kind of vote of no confidence, and maybe Pierre gets in there and kicks this can down the road for a few more years, then that's great. What we're trying to do at this point is just postpone this as long as possible. It doesn't make sense. It's not going to save lives. It's not going to reduce gun crime. If anything, it's going to make it much, much worse. And it's nice to see people like Doug Ford in Toronto starting to speak out. And this is why I have a little bit of hope. I believe that these idiots are going to go so far, just like the woke left did, to push the right over the edge. I think that we should encourage them in this direction. I think, you know, crime is going to get so rampant, and people's inability to defend themselves is going to be such a problem that eventually people are going to wake up. And you know what? I say take the SKS as well, because that's in the possession of millions of Canadians. If they take that, maybe people are going to clue in and wake up to the reality of what is currently happening. Anyways, they're calling this a voluntary program, and that's because there is a federal funding of $740 million. It's first come, first serve. So if you don't sell your guns quick enough, then you might not get any money at all. Again, for me, that's just moving the goalposts. I don't care about the money. I don't even care if they don't give me any money, because it's not going to make a difference to me. Well, maybe I'm a little bit more well off than some people, but in the sense that what I care about is preserving my gun rights. You know, you couldn't pay me enough money to concede that right. The amnesty deadline for compliance is October in 2026. Conservatives criticize it as punishing law-abiding gun owners and call it ineffective against gun violence. This Polly Saint-Souvien, I don't even know if I'm saying that properly, don't care, advocates adding the SKS rifle to the ban list to prevent loopholes. Fuck you. That's all I can say. Fuck you. All right, what else do we got? So there's a big, apparently a big Secret Service bust, a potential espionage operation in New York because of the UN Security Council meeting. This is a story I just received, so I don't have much details about it, so I'm not going to talk about it. Bunker demand in Germany up. I talked about that one. Yeah, this right here, this reminds me of this image right here. We just have to wait for one more murder-death-kill from Simon Phoenix, and then we can crack the case. This is why gold is approaching $4,000 an ounce, guys. Get ready, and if you're in Europe, get ready, because they're about to take the gloves off. Sparks are going to fly. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.